My testimony had no violence and no aggression and no anything. It was really like a surprise to me to the fact that I was even called to testify.
All seemed gleaming and glamorous in Diddy's universe, but Sharay Hayes just walked into the court to disclose grim secrets that shatter that illusion. Her explosive testimony regarding wild, orchestrated sex parties involving Cassie has you wondering, how far does this reality extend? And wait until you listen to Don Richard's spine-chilling report of violent antics. This is a Diddy. Nobody ever envisioned what actually went on behind closed doors.
As the Punisher, 51-year-old told us that based on his experience, he didn't know what alleged crime he was testifying about.
Sharay Hayes was a prosecution witness, though some believe he helped the defense. Our Anthony DiLorenzo joining us now. Anthony, you were inside the courtroom, and then right after you spoke to Mr. Hayes, who is relieved, he says, right, that all of this is over.
He certainly is. He told me that he never looked at Diddy, even in the eye, but was not intimidated at all by his presence on the stand, saying he was there just to tell the truth. But as someone who makes his living as a male dancer, wants people to know that he would never do anything to hurt a woman.
Sharay Hayes' powerful name may not have been known to the public at first, but now she's at the center of a stunning courtroom moment as an exotic dancer who often floated within Diddy's inner circle. Her account has revealed a part of the music mogul's life that few ever dreamed existed. Hayes painted herself as someone who got caught up in wild, extravagant parties, with privacy being a luxury few were given. Hayes described a life where she was part of this case because allegations of these parties gained momentum, and her first-hand accounts are now the most damning presented evidence. Her powerful account shocked everyone in the room. According to Hayes, it seems that Diddy not only threw these elaborate parties, but took a close personal interest in their organization. These were no ordinary parties in the usual sense. Hayes painted Cassie as the figure right at the center of these events. But not by choice. Cassie says for Hayes often looked uncomfortable and withdrawn, yet she would be coerced into performing for Diddy's amusement or for his guests. Hayes claimed Cassie was a central figure at these parties, but not by choice. Cassie says often. She says Cassie appeared uncomfortable and withdrawn with Hayes. Diddy allegedly had firm control over who was included or not, and he had not hesitation about laying claim to specific expectations of their behavior. What Hayes told of the events revealed a disturbing environment. She painted Cassie as living among an air of seductiveness and powerful, stifling music. Pumped expensive alcohol flowed freely, and the lighting was low, creating an atmosphere where it was easy to become lost in the moments and inhibitions. But Hayes painted Cassie's glamour as pretense behind the scenes. Power relationships dominated. Men of power mingled with young women.
Just hoping that I'm not viewed as somebody who did something to Cassie or contributed to her experience in a negative way.
Also on the stand Tuesday, Ventura's mother, Regina, who showed photos she took of her daughter's alleged physical abuse, and an email from Cassie fearing that Combs would release a sex tape or hurt her if she didn't pay him 20 grand, a sum he later returned. Combs' former personal assistant, David James, also testified how he once accompanied Diddy to confront Suge Knight in California, armed with guns, admitting he later quit because he thought his life was in danger. So back to Mr. Hayes, the Punisher, says he stopped getting calls for freak-offs after failing to satisfy the demands of the job he was paid thousands for, something that he's actually written about in his men's health book without naming names. So it was jam-packed today at court.
Yeah, wow. Anthony, it was really like a wide-ranging and fascinating interview. I'm curious, after you spoke with him, did he weigh in on Diddy's guilt or innocence?
So at this point, he says that he really has not read much about what this case is about, hasn't read up on any of the testimony so far, the facts of this case. He doesn't even have a full picture.
Who in Hayes' eyes appeared more like pawns than willing players. She said Diddy's presence was powerful, but intimidating, as he supposedly controlled the tone of the room and made it quite clear who held true power. What made Hayes' testimony even more credible were the specifics she gave that seemed to match up with other accounts. Courtroom whispers grew louder when Hayes spoke of specific venues, mansions, luxury penthouses, and private yachts where these things supposedly happened. Cross-referencing her timeline with other witness accounts, prosecutors suggested the descriptions matched prior insider reports. This uniformity, along with Hayes' descriptive storytelling, sent shockwaves through the courtroom. But perhaps most disturbingly chilling of Hayes' testimony was when she went on to describe specific interactions between Diddy and Cassie. She said Cassie's efforts to opt out were often shot down by Diddy, exerting subtle but unmistakable pressure. Hayes described it as less of asking and more of ensuring compliance wasn't optional. This testimony wasn't even the start of the bombshells as jaw-dropping as Sharay Hayes' testimony was. It became clear there were more unsettling truths yet to come. Don Richard, who collaborated intimately with Diddy as part of Danity Kane, had her own bombshell to share, and her attention wasn't on glitzy soirees, but on alleged violence that got much closer to home.
My testimony had no violence and no aggression and no anything. It was really like a surprise to me, to the fact that I was even called to testify.
Hours after leaving the witness stand, an escort named the Punisher spoke to Pix 11 about his surreal experience on the stand in the Sean Combs trial.
Was it intimidating sitting in front of him telling the story?
It was not, because the story is honestly what happened.
His real name? Sharay Hayes. The 51-year-old has been working in the adult entertainment industry for 30 years and recalls taking a phone call from Cassie Ventura in 2012.
Cassie is the one who always handed you the money?
Yes.
And she's the one who always set this up, except for that one weird text that you got?
Exactly.
This was his first foray as an escort, but says he would never participate in the so-called freak-offs had he thought Cassie was being coerced.
I literally can't say that any part of my experience gave me any cues that this was a woman in distress. More of a fetish type of scenario.
He says Diddy was directing the two, but never aggressively. Now that he knows about the sex trafficking allegations, regrets his participation.
Cassie's entrance into Diddy's world looked like the fairy tale of dreams. She was a young talent of undeniable ability, taken under the wing of one of music's most dominant players. Their very public relationship, a blend of professional partnership and personal affection, seemed to be a fairy tale match, but according to evidence, what went on backstage was far from glamorous. Sharay Hayes brought a much grimmer picture of what Cassie allegedly went through, depicting her as stuck in a world dictated and controlled by Diddy's power. Hayes testified that Cassie was at the center of many of these scripted meetings. Her involvement was never staged as willing, but rather the product of what Hayes detailed as coercion and mind games. According to Hayes, Diddy made it clear that everyone had their role to play, and Cassie's role was not up for discussion. These were not impromptu parties or spontaneous moments. They allegedly came with a script, one authored by Diddy. Hayes alleged Cassie frequently looked uncomfortable, her posture rigid, as if she were doing it out of necessity rather than choice. The court was treated to specific instances of how these gatherings were allegedly orchestrated. Hayes described intimate settings where attendees were screened and an anything-goes mentality ruled, but that freedom was not extended to all. For Cassie, Hayes alleged the pressure to perform was mandatory and her discomfort was disregarded. Hayes described a scene where Cassie supposedly attempted to extricate herself only to have Diddy step in and tell her to cut it out. The implication, Hayes indicated, was that Diddy's authority over Cassie left her little more than a blank slate. What's particularly heinous is how that supposed dynamic reflects patterns established in other major Hollywood cases. Experts have long debated the manner in which power imbalances between stars and their partners, or even their patron, more often create conditions ripe for exploitation. In Cassie's instance, the multiple layers of Diddy's control from her music life to their private relationship more than tripled the pressure. Hayes testimony indicates this was more than just manipulation. In a professional capacity, it was intensely personal. An intractable web. Cassie couldn't get free of prosecutors indicated there may be additional witnesses who could come forward with more details corroborating Hayes' allegation. If so, it could create an even clearer picture of Diddy's supposed hold on Cassie. For the moment, her function in these gatherings is a shocking indictment of the power imbalance Hayes and others have described. The courtroom was left stuck on more ultimate questions regarding consent autonomy and the extent to which someone with Diddy's power could exert influence. But Hayes wasn't the last one with explosive allegations. Don Richard's emotional testimony would shortly shift attention away.
The Punisher, and that he was a male exotic dancer, and I was like, oh, that kind of clicked. So he had walked in. He's a very tall man. He's well put together. He had an entire suit on with a tie. He's very built, and the first thing that the prosecution asked was just about the exhibit photos, those exhibit photos being just kind of a standard press photo essentially of Diddy and Cassie, and he confirmed that that's Cassie Ventura and that's Sean Combs, aka Diddy. And so he said in the fall of 2012 he was paid to create a sexy erotic scene for a woman who had called him. He said that he met the two while he was working at a club event, but it was a woman who had called him saying that she wanted kind of a present by her husband around her birthday time, and that her husband said it was okay if she were to hire a dancer. So the Punisher initially thought that he was going to be doing kind of a dance for women at a bachelorette party, but when somebody opened the door, it was, lo and behold, Cassie Ventura. He had said that she was wearing a bathrobe and she was a wig, and initially didn't even recognize her at first. But this was this first meetup that they had, again, expecting a crowd during this, but really it was just Cassie in the room. Again, not knowing it was Cassie at the time. And then he was told that her husband wanted her to put baby oil on each other and create this kind of fantasy, this erotic scene.
Don Richard, better known as a member of the girl group Danity, Kane had her share of success under Diddy's guidance. She emerged on the scene during the height of Diddy's influence, early in the 2000 SE, when he was masterminding reality TV-fueled music acts and building his empire. But her testimony revealed she saw so much more than the highs and lows of a music career. Her experiences painted a picture of violence that shocked the courtroom and added another level to the already horrific allegations against him. While most of the witnesses in the case were centered on unveiling Diddy's alleged control and coercion, Dawn's testimony brought attention to what she described as frequent outbursts of anger and aggression. She claimed Diddy didn't simply manipulate, he used physical aggression to instill fear in those around him. One such incident, Dawn recounted, involved an exchange during a recording session where Diddy allegedly lashed out over a disagreement. It didn't matter who was there. When he got angry, you felt it, she said, adding that the emotional aftermath of these incidents lingered long after they occurred. But the most chilling story Dawn recounted wasn't one of a studio meltdown or a professional disagreement. It was personal. According to her, she once witnessed Diddy grab Cassie's arm during an argument, pulling her so hard that she winced in pain. Dawn's voice reportedly shook as she detailed how the room froze in silence, no one daring to intervene. This isn't the first time volatile behavior has been linked to Diddy, but hearing an insider like Dawn describe so vividly struck a chord in the courtroom. What stands out in Dawn's story is how these incidents didn't just impact one person, they created an environment where everyone felt on edge. She claimed that Diddy's temper was unpredictable, describing moments where he'd switch from charm to furious outbursts with little warning. It was like walking on eggshells, she said, highlighting how his demeanor could flip in an instant for Dawn. And as she hinted, perhaps many others, this wasn't so much a work dynamic, it became a way of life that forced the people around him to constantly manage his moods. What makes Dawn's revelations so compelling is how they intersect with prior rumors of Diddy's behavior. Over the years, whispers of his explosive temper have crept up every so often, but they were always dismissed as exaggerations or misinterpretation of artistic genius. Her testimony, however, adds vivid detail and first-hand witness to those allegations and frames them in a much darker light. Dawn's statements also provide what Sharay Hayes and other testimonies did not a viewpoint on how this alleged violence wasn't simply about